We serve 11 orphanages there. We have an education program, which you'll hear from Marisha later. And we have a staff of 4 that oversee the orphanages on an ongoing basis. A little bit of history on Liberia. They had a 13-year civil war. After 7 years, they still have no electricity. If you don't have a generator, you have no electricity. No water distribution system, that also means no sewer. No postal system, no medical facilities, or they're limited. And an entire generation without education. To give you an example, if a child was 4, 5, 6 years old when that war started that lasted 13 years, the boys were actually pulled into that war as child soldiers. So they served in a war as 8, 9, 10 years old, all the way on up through their teenage years. So they'd never had any education through that. The education system itself was shut down, as well as all other government services for the most part. So as we look at this and look in Liberia's needs, our board of directors has focused on 2 things. One is to improve education, and the second is to improve medical care. And I'll take a look at each of these. Improving education. About 18 months ago, Gary was in Liberia, and he asked one of the students that we were sponsoring what he was going to do now that he's graduated high school. And he said that he was going to be an accountant. And Gary said, "Are you good with numbers?" And he said, "No, not really." And Gary asked him, "What's 14 plus 14? And he answered 20. Gary went around and asked a handful of kids similar questions, and then emailed me a few minutes later and said, "We got a problem here. We're sponsoring kids, and I don't know that they're getting educated." Months later, which is the trip that George was referring to earlier, 4 of us went and tested the kids. Ruth and Gary did that while George and I checked the other needs of the kids, and we found that to be pretty common. A more recent trip, Gary and I were in Liberia just 2 months ago, and we are going through the schools that we're sponsoring, and we asked basic questions, and this was one of them, 8 times 8. And there was a young man in high school that we asked this simple question, and he answered 8 times 8, same as the question. I'm going to show you a video in a minute, and it will show you the actual, I'll take you right into that classroom, and you'll see him answering that question there. Gary asked that question 3 times, and he gets the same answer. He even writes down the question because, whether you believe it or not, we actually have an accent. Liberians speak English too, but we have an accent when we're in their country. So we wanted to be clear about our questions. You'll see a very enthusiastic young lady in the background, and she wants to answer because she's got the answer. I don't know about you, but every time I had the answer and I raised my hand, the teacher would ask me a different question. And sure enough, Gary did that to the poor young lady. He asked her what 9 times 9 was, and she answered 18. Once we clarified, or he clarified, that the question was multiplication, she answered 60.
How much? What's the answer?
8.
Huh? 8 down 8. What's the answer? That's the question. What's the answer? How much is 8 times 8?
Yeah, it's done.
Yes. How much is it?
Okay, how about the young lady? He's going to give you a different one. What's the question?
9 times 9. Close.
18?
Did you say 18?
18. 1 8.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. Times, not adding. Times. Multiply. Yeah, 9 times 9. 60?
60? 9 times 9, 60? A couple things you can focus on in that picture is Marisha, our teacher that we've sent to Liberia, coming in to rescue that poor young man that is really defeated because he couldn't answer a simple question like that. And as you take a look at that, I've watched this clip probably 20 times over the last couple weeks, and you take a look at that young man and that poor young lady doing the best they can. You can tell they're making the best effort they can. It's not that they're not showing up to school or they're cutting class or they're disrespectful. That is absolutely not the case with Liberian children at all. They're doing the best they can, and we want to help them more. About 4 years ago, I was at a library opening, a celebration with my friend Christine, and she was giving the keynote speech. And afterward, we were outside and we were talking about the value of education. And she taught me something that was very, very important that I've never forgotten. She taught me that teach a child to read, that they can learn anything. And I'm here to tell you that that's what we intend to do. Because if we teach these children to read, that's something no one can take from them. Our second focus is medical. We've had the same policy in Liberia for 6 years. We've let the orphanage directors know they can take the kids to the hospital, to the clinic. They can purchase medicine at any time without an approval. And believe me, we have forms for approvals. They can get a form for new clothes. They can get a form for just about anything you can think of. We approve it, and Gary will process that RFE form, right? Request for expense. But when it comes to kids' medical needs, that's not required. But for some reason, the directors, maybe it's a cultural reason, maybe it's because they feel that with the food that they're being given and the construction needs that are being met and the education programs that we have in place, maybe they're asking for too much and they don't want to ask. So we feel it's necessary to have a medical professional on the ground, just as we have an education professional today. To give you a couple examples, the kids have to be dewormed 2 times a year. It doesn't prevent worms, it just kills the worms they have, so it must happen. In December, we funded the deworming of the kids, and we have some pictures of some of the orphanages receiving that medicine. But in January, when a friend of ours traveled to Liberia, and she asked, can I go around and visit the God's Kids supported orphanages and make sure the kids are doing fine medically? And we said, absolutely, we would appreciate that. One of the orphanages she went to, one of the kids had so many worms he was actually vomiting them up. So if he had been given the medicine, the deworming medicine, a couple months prior, then obviously that wouldn't be happening. Another story, that same young lady that was helping us, last year she rushed a child, Moses, to the hospital to get surgery. In doing so, they found out they didn't have enough blood for the surgery. So she offered hers, and they still needed more. Unfortunately, they found another patient in the hospital that had the same blood type. And so they were going to go ahead and use both of their blood and do the surgery on Moses. After further investigation, our friend found out that the other patient was an HIV patient. And the thinking was that if they mixed that person's blood with hers, that it would be okay in that surgery. So thankfully, she stopped that from happening and called all of our orphanage directors in until they found enough people with the same blood type and were able to perform the surgery. And Moses is doing fine. Thank you very much to our partnership with Hands of Mercy. This is just a couple examples that go on a daily and weekly basis of why we need trained and experienced medical staff on the ground.